Come back to the news review segment of the Power Breakfast Show, and this time round we look at what's making headlines in the papers. Later on with my panelists, Mheshimiwa Beatrice Elachi, Nairobi County Speaker, and Mheshimiwa Gakure Monyo, First Deputy Governor, Murang'a County, will be helping me understand what's making headlines in the papers this morning. I look at the Daily Nation, front page, NASA in crisis talks on Raila Oath Plan. Now the opposition chiefs are expected to confront claims that some of the coalition's principals are plotting to scuttle the swearing-in ceremony, besides resolving complaints that Wiper was cheated out of parliamentary leadership positions. This and more on page 4 of the Daily Nation. Of course, President Uhuru Kenyatta jets back into the country after a 3-day official visit to South Africa, where he held talks with the South African President Jacob Zuma and, of course, Cyril Ramaphosa, the Deputy President of the country, who is also the ANC party leader. The President, while down south, also had a chance to attend the 106th anniversary for the oldest party in Africa, the African National Congress. Of interest on page 1, now poor homes hit as fuel prices go up. First it was poor homes or low consumers of electricity having to pay more, and now the cost of kerosene has gone up by 3 shillings and 36 cents a litre, dealing a huge blow to millions of Kenyans who rely on fuel for cooking and lighting. This and more in the announcement by the Energy Regulatory Commission on the increase of prices. That is also captured on the back page of the Daily Nation. New fuel prices deal a blow to poor families. The cost of kerosene goes up by 3 shillings and 36 cents per litre. That of diesel goes up by 2 shillings and 39 cents per litre, and super petrol goes up by 2 shillings and 13 cents per litre. Those new prices are effective last night at around 12 o'clock. Other stories on the Daily Nation, page 2, new Form 1's reporting deadline amid low turnout. Now apparently the CS raised concern over what he termed as poor turnout records in various schools at the coast. This as the ministry announced that now the new deadline for Form 1's reporting has been pushed from Friday last week to 17th, which is Wednesday this week. Also on the Daily Nation, theft in hotel rooms spoils the holiday mood. This and more stories on page 3. Page 4, the story about NASA holding crisis talks today. Page 5, European Union poll report to be implemented. Should be implemented. The state is now urged. Civil society has called on the government to implement recommendations of a report by the European Union Election Observer Mission. Now page 6 of the Daily Nation has a story about power, tender wars at the center of the Nairobi crisis. This is reference to the resignation of former Nairobi Deputy Governor Polycarp Igathe, and a picture there of Deputy President William Ruto, and Nairobi Governor Mike Sonko, ICT Cabinet Secretary Joe Mucheru, and Nairobi Speaker Beatrice Elachi, who is in my panel this morning, and of course the former Deputy Governor Polycarp Igathe, who has since resigned, and I believe Beatrice will be telling us more about this, especially given that she sits in the legislative wing of the county government. Now, there is a proposed bill. This bill was proposed by Senator Kipchumba Murkomen to have governors appoint deputies. Should a vacancy arise, county bosses will have 14 days to make a replacement. Governors will have that power if this bill that is being talked about on page 7 is passed into law. And now Senator Kipchumba Murkomen is asking that the debate on this bill should be fastened in the House. Other stories making headlines is Al-Shabaab preach in a village for an hour. Quite scary. Page 9 of the Daily Nation. Now tension is high in Ishakani, Lamu East Sub-County, after about 100 heavily armed suspected Al-Shabaab militias arrived at the village and preached to residents for an hour yesterday morning. The village is on the Kenya-Somali border. The announcement or notice on the new prices of fuel can be found on page 11 for all the towns in the country and where exactly fuel will cost how much. Back page, as I told you earlier, new fuel prices deal a blow to poor families. We'll also be discussing that with my panelists this morning. A quick look at the Standard. Top of the page, now Raila battles suspicion in NASA. His hands are full as the coalition principals and core principals meet today against a backdrop of raging claims of betrayal, double dealing and sabotage ahead of the planned swearing in. This and more on the story on page 5. A number of burning issues, according to the Standard now. Wiper demands a slot in the Parliamentary Service Commission, claiming that it was shortchanged by ANC and Ford Kenya. ODM MP claims Kalonzo and Wetangula are not keen on Raila swearing in. ANC has one PSC slot, asks Wiper to relinquish one House leadership position in exchange for the PSC slot. ANC accuses ODM of using its majority to deny partners positions. ANC also accuses ODM of collaborating with Jubilee, claiming Duale and Mbadi struck a deal. And then, of course, there is the issue of other parties feeling that ODM has concentrated leadership positions in Homa Bay and Migori counties. Those are some of the issues that the principals of NASA apparently, according to the Standard, will be seeking to iron out when they meet later on today. Now, the El Ade KDF camp raid was 2 years ago. On page 10, you will find memories, stories from survivors, stories from families as they relive the pain of the deadly attack, and the anniversary will be marked with tributes to fallen heroes who sacrificed their lives to secure this great country. Also, on page 4 of the Standard, gunman attacks Waititu's deputy's guard, and kills the father. That's the Deputy Governor James Nyoro's guard was killed and was attacked and injured, and his father actually killed. Now, James Nyoro is unsure if it's a political thuggery, but calls for thorough investigation into the attack against his staff and family. On page 4, like I told you, the story about the attack on Deputy Governor James Nyoro's bodyguard and the killing of his dad. And of course, in Kitui, 3 Wiper Party members of the County Assembly have backed Nairobi businessman Maluki Kitili, who hopes to replace the late Kitui West Member of Parliament Francis Nyenze. That and more on page 4 of the Standard. Page 5 has the story about NASA principals meeting amid disquiet in partner parties. Of course, page 6 is the story about Al-Shabaab militias planting IEDs as they withdrew. Apparently, Islamists take over deserted police station and hoist a flag. This is a story that can be found on page 6 of the Standard. Other stories making headline, like I told you, page 10, 7 years of battle, a special anniversary following the attacks on the El Ade military camp. Page 10 and page 11, our gallant soldiers giving their all, including their lives, to ensure that we have security along our borders. Now, page 12. The city boss talks to Uhuru on Igathe exit. President Uhuru Kenyatta has urged Nairobi Governor Mike Sonko to focus on service delivery and shun political sideshows. Now, this came days after Polycarp Igathe formally resigned as deputy governor, citing frustration and lack of trust from his boss. The editorials are here. A question is being posed to members of parliament. Do politicians have a right to interfere with the running of schools? This is a thing that has been happening the last few days across the country. In other places, politicians making it even difficult for transferred principals to settle down. So the question is, do they have a right to meddle with the running of schools? Now, that is just about all that we were looking at in the papers today. Of course, many more stories. You will have a chance to go through them. But for now, good morning, Beatrice Elachi, Nairobi's County Speaker. The last time you were here, you were nominated in Parliament. So I must say congratulations for your new position.
Thank you.
And of course, Bonagakure Monyo, now a businessman, first Deputy Governor Nairobi, Murang'a County. I start with you, Bwana Monyo. Why did you choose, I asked you this question, I will ask you again. Why did you choose not to go for your seat again?
I'll give you the answer. And good
you
morning.
Gave it to me, give it to me again.
I'll give you the same answer I gave you a while back. And you can see from what we persevered, others are unable to persevere. And we were the initial deputy governors. We went through the same challenges. I felt I didn't deliver what was expected of me. And hence I opted not to either seek re-election as a deputy governor or go for the governorship, but decided to go back to what I knew best in how it is done.
Are you talking in reference to Polycarp Igade's resignation?
Well, in reference to Polycarp Igade's resignation, it's a little unfortunate for the Nairobians. And as I work here, he was my deputy governor, because now I'm working here in the city. It's a little unfortunate. But you may need to understand what he says. He lacked to get trust in administration, in learning administration and management of the city county, where in our case we had the constituents to serve. So we didn't have a provision for giving up, because we had to serve our constituents to the end of our term. And that is what kept us running. It was very challenging for me, and it is challenging for other deputy governors, because the constitution doesn't warrant them roles and responsibilities. And you can see somewhere else you'll find that there's something Senator Mulkomen is talking about, bills to ensure that there are roles and responsibilities for the deputy governors. There are also ways that the deputy governor can be impeached. There are also ways that a deputy governor would be replaced. Because going forward, you'll find now Nyeri would not have a deputy governor, Nairobi will not have a deputy governor if Polycarp Igade doesn't decide his decision. And that leaves a big lacuna that it could happen that there are very many counties without deputy governors. And I would sincerely urge Senator Mulkomen, because it is actually not a new bill. Yeah. It was our bill as deputy governors in the sitting, in the first dispensation, that they hasten this so that they can fill in the lacuna, get ways of how things are properly sorted out. I may bring you to speed to know that today, unless a deputy governor is committed of a crime and jailed, there is no way a deputy governor can be removed from office.
They can't be fired?
They can't be fired, they can't be impeached. Just
you can only be frustrated out of office.
You can only be frustrated
out of office.
Or out of office. And
so if you have a thick skin, you can be frustrated, but you won't move out.
But you won't move. You will serve your constituents or do the job you intended to go and do. And that is the case now.
What exactly is this job you intended for you to do?
You know, it depends with where you come from. I personally had...
When your former boss came to you and told you run as his deputy, did you have a TOR?
He knew I have a constituent to serve. So, and that constituent was to bring a block of votes into his kitty. Oh. So I had what I was bringing on the table.
So yours was to bring the block of votes?
Yes, I was bringing the block of votes from where I came from. And that I did. In the other case, as he's putting it, is that he's lacking trust in managing the administration and management of Nairobi City County. So for him, he was going to do a job, which I am sure he had wanted to do it to the best of his capability, and as how he had done when he was in the corporate world. But he should have been a deputy governor with an electorate that he reports to, which he could have gone to consult and ask, my people, do I resign or do I soldier on? And they would have told him, you still carry our interest in the second dispensation for 5 years. That way, he wouldn't have resigned.
I want to get to Beatrice and get a glimpse of the finer details of the Nairobi scenario. But before then, Bwana Gakure Monyo, what exactly happens when somebody goes for a deputy? Are you told you have to take this person to be your deputy, or do you look at the candidates available and decide who suits your interest most as a governor candidate?
The different intricacies to this. I remember myself when we went along with Governor Mwangi wa Iria, we didn't even have a third person in our conversation to go together. It is ourselves who sat and discussed, because we knew each other. We said, this is what these are your strengths, this is what you bring on board, so let's go together to ensure that we will capture the seat for governor and deputy governor from Murang'a County, and then we run the county together. That was how we discussed. If you remember, on this table, we sat with Polycarp Igade, and he said they were interviewed as many people to take up that job. So he did an interview, he passed. I also know deputy governors like Nyandarua, Cecilia, yes, she did an interview where she did not know the governor in person, but she did an interview among very many people, and she qualified, and they're working. So it all depends with how you get to it.
What matters? Interest or trust?
how to go forward is what matters. And it will be an ingredient of trust, proper working etiquettes, looking forward, what are the intentions to serve the people, and all that. When you bring all that mix together, for sure a relationship works. Whether a tough one, an easy one, or whichever way it would go.
Mheshimiwa Beatrice Elachi, you head a wing of the county that is now in darkness because they don't know if they are going to have a deputy governor or they are not going to have one. Probably you could shed a light onto as to what has really been going on. There is so much talk all over.
Thank you very much. Yes, there's so much talk, but I want to say to greet the viewers good morning, and it has been very interesting. And for me, maybe I'll start from behind. When you start your campaign, as Deputy Governor says, that you come into people, you don't understand me, you don't understand maybe my values, you don't understand my temperaments. And therefore, when you're heading into office, I think the first few months, it is now learning each other as you move. Now, I look at Nairobi and say Nairobi will be more as like a national government. It is, indeed, just like a national government, because the roles are very huge than any other county. They are dynamic. And you find that for us at the county assembly level, which now we are supposed to ensure we guide and ensure the laws are passed, your structures are created for Nairobi. I think I want to thank the county assembly, both sides, because we did it very together without being partisan. We were able to create and give them what they gave us in the way they wanted. So for that, I want to thank the county assembly, the members. But then going... And
now the executors.
And the executors now have taken over. I see the CECs together. My biggest worry is whether they have this opportunity to sit together once in a very early morning and understand each other and say, we are about to start and this is how we move. Because if you don't do that, if you don't understand your own system, many people will, and you have very different companions who are outside this system, then you're going to have a big challenge in executing what you want to do. And therefore, for me, I find Nairobi has a lot of external people who come in, both sides, who would want to know, who would have different ideas, yes, but if you don't, they will not understand how to bake this cake in a manner where you are able now to say, we have baked it and this is how we execute and implement what we told Nairobi.
So, Speaker, are you saying what we are seeing in the leadership of Nairobi's executive is a lot of external influence?
I think, yes, I would say that. And I know the governor is one person, number one, who has this heart that is very open, yeah, that he will appreciate everyone. And sometimes in that level, you find yourself now caught up because people take advantage of that goodwill and now will use the goodwill to do what they want to do. So it is a challenge where sometimes we say when you're a manager, you should not, you're not supposed to be good. Don't have this good heart, because people will take advantage of the good heart and they will completely destroy what you were supposed to. Because what you normally do, you are touching on issues that some people will not be very happy about it, and they will not say you are good, but don't care, because you are there to ensure the majority will appreciate after that. So that is one thing. But the other thing now, we go to law now. Yes, by law.
I'll come to the law in a short while, and this is where I will want the input of the house that you lead. Yes. But before then, you've said something that I would need Banagakure Monyo's input. External influence.
I think
you were there before. You know the inside information. To what extent do external forces interfere with the county leaderships? Could they be the reason for the failure in most of our counties?
Well, external forces might be within the forces. That you might have that the forces are coming in between the governor and the deputy, within the people who hedge around them. Hence, they cause some friction between the two. External forces outside the setup of the executive of the county government would only influence when people are consorting outside. But however, if you're working within the setup, I don't see too much of external power coming to the great extent to that extent. Why would I say this? I would say this because if a governor consults the electorate, would you call that external power? No, it's not, because those are the people who put the government.
They're the main stakeholders.
They're the main stakeholders. So it will not be external power. If there will be any other, for example, the church and all that, they come in as stakeholders. So if you didn't understand them as stakeholders and you took them as external powers, then the challenge comes into play. If there is any, for example, say in my county there is a CS who is exerting pressure on us, that CS is not an external power. He belongs to the county, so he's still a stakeholder or a PS or something. And in the Nairobi case, I've seen names being thrown to State House. State House sits in Nairobi, so it's a stakeholder in what happens in the county of Nairobi. The occupants of State House in there living at State House are stakeholders for Nairobi.
And so there would be nothing wrong if they give their opinion
on what needs to be happened to the city where they sit in.
Speaker Elachi.
Let me just tell my deputy governor, when we talk of external, it is not the stakeholders. It is me, and he knows that, with an interest that I want. I know by the time I was supporting you, I needed this. And because you are not about to give me, and now it becomes a very murky. Because in the same way, it's the same way when you look at my president. And you remember for the 4 years that the president took over, we had a lot of sabotage because of many other things. And who sabotaged? It is those who felt we ran this campaign and we did not get, and we have stakes and we belong here. They forget that when you're doing it to have a leader who will come and now look at the whole picture.
So we would rather say vested selfish interests rather than external interests.
Yes.
Now tell us about the law. Where does Nairobi sit now?
Well, it sits the way Nyeri sits. I'm sorry to say that, because there's no law. So we can't even say that it is silent. There is no law, and so that is why my majority leader in the Senate has to ensure now we implement what the deputy governors in the first 4 years really wanted to.
For starters, can Polly Kapigade go back now and say, okay, I have changed my mind, I am not resigning now?
Well, you know, I would tell my deputy governor that it is not him individually that got the seat. This is a seat he was given by an elected.
No, what I'm asking, by law, can he now go back and say, okay, I have not resigned, I'm back in office?
By law, he gave up to 31st. It is up to him now. He can. But when I look at him, he has a very different etiquette and value in his career. And I think in the corporate world...
He appears like he has made up his mind.
Yes, and in a corporate world, they are very smart. They always say that you look at an institution, and if you think it's going down, you walk out before it goes down with your name.
That's a very strong statement, Banagakure Monyo. Can he go back and say, okay, I have changed my mind?
I like the wisdom that dictated him to give a widow to the 31st of January. That's serious wisdom in its own sense. And I also like the way it's being approached by Nairobi leadership, led by the Senator Johnson Sakaja. Because he's saying, Nairobi is for all of us. We will come together, look at this, see what are the challenges that are leading to this. Where can we address it and put it back to shape? And I think that widow of up to the 31st of January has left Nairobi in a very strong position that there can be stakeholders coming together and saying, yes, the rain started beating us because of A, B, C, D, but we can correct it. And then they will say, for the sake of running Nairobi County, Polycarp Igathe is the deputy governor. Rescind your decision. Honorable Mike Sonko is the governor. Understand what your deputy is asking for. Come together for the sake of the biggest economy as county governments are concerned, and move on. And I believe, with the way you have started seeing Senator Sakaja, Nairobi stakeholders coming through, if I would advise Deputy Governor Sonko Igade, listen to the voices of the people of Nairobi and the leadership, and from there then decide what it is. It's a little different in political dispensation than in the corporate world, that you would fear that in the corporate world, if you backtracked, for sure you'll be later now fired. Yeah. But in this case, the Nairobi electorate would keep him till 2022 and wait for his services as they had entrusted them to him. So in the interest of Nairobi leadership, Senator Erachi, Speaker Erachi, please come together and see how you will not leave Nairobi in a lacuna of no deputy governor.
Finally, on this issue, before I give Speaker Erachi a chance, in your opinion, because you've been there, I will say that again. Yeah. What is the best that a deputy governor can do before these bills come into law? With the status quo now, what is the best you can do when you're feeling frustrated and unsatisfied?
Persistent.
Because, by the way, it's not just Nairobi. We have had quarters where feuds are simmering. They're not as loud, they're not as bold.
Well, persistent. In our time, we were picked as 4 or 5 of us, Muranga, Machakos, Kisumu, and that, who felt that like we are not heading in the right direction with the governors. But none of us resigned. And I say what I had said earlier, because we had an electorate to serve. I think whoever finds challenges, at least there's some light at the end of this tunnel through the
interestingly, Muranga, Machakos, Kisumu, and which was the other one?
I think there was Wajir, and the very conspicuous were the 3.
You were never on the ticket with your former bosses?
Yes, and none of us went on the same ticket, and well, Kisumu didn't go back. So I think what should be is the alley of hope on Senator Murkomen's bill, that shortly, when Senate resumes, there could be some light at the end of the tunnel that will be telling the deputy governors, these are your roles and responsibilities, this is what you can do if you fail to deliver your roles and responsibility as far as impeachment is concerned, and also it will fill in a gap of what will be done. The Constitution under Section 180, subsection 6, says that the Independent and Electoral Commission can never conduct an election for a deputy governor alone, because the deputy governor must be a nominee of a candidate who's won a ticket to vie for the seat of a governor. So unless that is looked into and says, in the event, either the governor can appoint, or maybe there can be a by-election, I don't know how the legislators will look at it best, that may be sorted. But if this goes on, we might find 10, 12, 30 counties without deputies as we progress.
Mheshimiwa Elachi, finally, still in Nairobi, before we move on to the issue of fuel and the cost of living and everything, is the Nairobi County Assembly satisfied with the way things are running in Nairobi now?
Well,
service delivery.
I would say, first of all, we are moving on. I know there's a report we are waiting for the state of Nairobi, and therefore we are satisfied, because we knew when they were coming in, it is not just an easy thing to come in. You first look at what you're coming into, and that is what the governor has done, ensured he has audited to find himself and ask himself, what is the state of Nairobi? And I think that is where they had reached. That is why many people will feel things are not moving, but internally they have done a lot to understand how do we move the structures, how do we ensure we get more revenue, and what are the mechanisms of ensuring now we are able to collect different revenues and automate those revenues. So I think the internal structures, they had really tried coming up with understanding where they are coming from, and understanding that they have a very huge debt that they received when they were coming into office. But for us also, we know both of them are the best for Nairobi. If it is the deputy governor and the governor, that was the best match. It is just a matter of how do we, each of them should ask, how do I understand my colleague, or understand that I have this weakness, and therefore I'll work with the strength of my partner.
Fair enough.
And lastly, they have to understand that when Nairobians were giving them the ticket, they knew in their mind something will happen. And I still have that hope. It will happen and it will be good for Nairobi. I just want to tell both of them that sometimes when you're running such a big thing, you also need to focus, as he said, on stakeholders, even church leaders. You call them in. Have an opportunity also to understand it is God who has given you an opportunity to serve at this.
So you're appealing to them to talk.
Yes, to talk and to ensure.
I need us to take a commercial break, but I still need to get a clear answer from you.
Yes.
As far as your ratings as the Nairobi County Assembly on the performance of the county government of Nairobi. I'm asking this on the background of the report that was released by an NGO that ranked Nairobi Governor Sonko's approval rating at this, is it second lowest or third lowest?
Well, for me, I'd want to read, first of all, what were the questions that were asked.
Are you satisfied with the service delivery by your governor? That was the question.
And that is what they asked Kenyans.
Yes.
And I know they will say no or yes, because they will not understand internally what has he done. Internally, he has recreated and regenerated a structure that will move forward. That one he has done. And some of these structures are so within, we will say, a theory way. So practically people will not understand because they are not seeing. But internally, you will, when you come to Nairobi County, you'll find that he has a system that he is able to understand from you parking your car and where he's seated. Have you paid or not? At least he started on the basis of saying, I need revenue to run this Nairobi. To deliver that services, he has to have a clear revenue and where he's getting
Gakure Monyo, was it too ambitious for most of these governors to make pledges for the first 100 days in office? Because that is what was used for the approval ratings. Their first 100 days in office.
Well, if you remember, first 100 days in office is a statement that came into the political circles in this country in the year 2002, when there was real change from Kano government to another government. And that drove the electorate to believing that we've been promised 100 days. If you remember, in 2002, the Constitution was meant to have been delivered in 100 days. It didn't come through. So to me, I take it as a political statement that resonates well with the electorate during campaigns.
Yeah,
so
Wananchi should understand it,
yes,
to that extent.
Yes, it's a communication way to get votes.
Fair enough. We're taking a commercial break. When we come back, we'll be looking at more news in the papers, including the new prices for fuel, the end of the subsidized UNGA program, and of course the recent issue about the rise in electricity cost for low consumers.